Alright, I'm going to create a little video here for creating your die and template for your invitation. First thing we're going to do is go File, New, and from previous files I've created, I had a letter selected. I switched my units to inches. It's going to give us an 8.5 by 11 file. I click the advanced down so that we're in CMYK mode for printing. Click OK. Alright, there we go. First thing I like to do is just go ahead and draw a rectangle. And I know that from the assignment, the width is going to be 7.5 wide, and the height will be 4.75. Press return, change the size. Oops, I had the link button pressed here, so it changed everything. Or once I put in this value, it changed my width value. So I unlinked it with this constrain width and height proportions. So I'm going to go back to my width and change it to 7.5. There we go. Now I know because the width of the paper is 8.5 and the width of my design is going to be 7.5, that I'm going to have a 1/2 inch on each side. So to center that, best way to do that is this time I'm going to double click on the rectangle tool. I'm going to make a 0.5 inch width and 0.5 inch height. Press OK and it gives me a perfect square. I'm going to grab this point here and drag it up to the top of the page, and see how my little arrow turns white? That means it has snapped to point. So make sure in your view window that snap to point is checked. Make sure your show bounding box is turned off, because if it's on, you can't grab a point on a rectangle because the little editing squares are on the corners. It's also good to make sure to snap to grid is turned off, so when you're drawing something in particular, it doesn't grab it away from you and throw it on a grid. Alright, so I got this snap to point, and I'm going to grab my rectangle for my design area, grab that point and grab it and slide it over the other point, and it snaps to point. I'm going to grab this upper corner of this one, and while pressing the option key and click and drag, it duplicates that rectangle. I'm going to do the same for this. Once I select it, press the option key, click and drag down to this rectangle again, and there's my two rectangles to design in. We can delete these construction squares now. Now we're going to use a 1/8 inch bleed, and the best way to do that is go to Object, Path, Offset Path, and in here type in 0.125 or 125 thousandths, as they say in engineering terms. Click OK, and it gives us that 1/8 inch bleed all the way around. I'll do the same for this one. And once you punch this number or type this number in and it shows up again, I'm just going to say OK, and there we go. Now for the trim marks that I mentioned, we're going to draw a small line. Now when you're drawing with the pen tool and you draw a line and you don't want it to be at an angle like that, hold down the shift key and click another point. That one's too small to see, so I'm going to use my arrow key, and that edits that and makes it longer and wider. But when you hold down the shift key, it keeps it at a 90 degree or 45 degree increment angle, so I know that point, that line is straight up and down. Now I want this line to be directly in line with the area that's going to be the final cutout. So I'm going to click, and what I did was grab that point and drag it over to this point until that arrow turns white. That means it has snapped to point. I'm going to use my arrow up key and slide it just above the bleed mark. Now I'm going to hold the Option key. When I click on it, that's going to duplicate it. I'm going to snap it into place on this one. I'm going to move it up. Same way, just move it just above the bleed. And now I'm going to select both of them by just click and drag and grab both of those. Hold the Option key, click and drag. And once I drag these down, once I've pressed the Option and clicked and drag and it's duplicated, then I'm going to hit the Shift key and it holds it directly in line from the last place I moved it. So I'm going to slide this one down just below this one also. So there are those marks. We'll go grab this one, hold my Option key, click and drag, it duplicates it. Now here I'm going to grab the Transform tool, or you can just press the letter E. The Transform tool has those little editing boxes, and when you're outside of those boxes it turns into the Rotate tool. So I'm going to click and then just start rotating. Now if you hold down the Shift key, it only rotates in 45-degree increments, and so we now know it's perfectly horizontal. Go back to my Direct Select tool or press the letter V, it will give it to you. We'll grab this point and bring it right over this point, and it turns white. We'll let go. I'm going to copy this one and drag it to this point, and this point, and this point here. Now go back and grab each one of those and hold down the Shift key as I grab the next one, and the next one, and the next one. Oops, I missed it. There we go. Now I'm going to use my arrow keys and slide this over out of the way, off the bleed. I'm going to hold the Option key while everything is still selected. Click and drag. Hold the Shift key once I get over here. That keeps everything in line. And let go, and there are my trim marks. Now what is going to be helpful for you is we're going to create a few layers to work in. One layer we're going to call the die. Double click on that, and it gives you the option to rename it. So we're going to call that the die layer. And then let's create one for the trim marks and just call it trim. And then we're going to do one, let's call this one background. And then the next one art. You can have as many or few layers as you want. The layers are good in this case because we'll be able to turn them on and off or lock them so that when you are working with your type, you can lock your background layer by clicking beside your eyeball here, and if you go to grab your type, you don't accidentally grab your background and move it around while you're rearranging your type. So for now I'm going to take what I created on the die. Actually I'm going to select everything with my arrow tools because I want to move my trim marks. I'm going to hold down the Shift key and select these parts, and that only left the trim marks left. And once those are selected, you can go over here to your layers palette, click and just drag that up, and we can lock those because we don't need those now, and we can turn them off even because you don't need them while you're designing, but you need them there before they go to the printer. Now you're not actually going to send these to the printer, but this is the way things will go when you send them to a printer in your job. I'm going to go ahead and lock my die layer, and actually I think what I'll do is go ahead and change the color of these. We're going to make this the outline of one of them cyan and the outline of the other magenta. That way we know the difference between the two. There we go. And that's how you create your file to turn in. Save that. And the way we're going to save that is with each file that you create to turn in, type your first name first and underscore, and then this is project 1, so type your first name, So here it's Steven, then P1 for project 1, and then template. Save. I'm going to replace the one I did earlier. Okay. Alright, now for when I do thumbnails, I like to start with the actual proportion ratio that I'm designing in. So I'm going to copy this, then create a new one, a new page. I'm going to paste that into place. I'm going to press the letter E, which gives me the transform tool. Hold down the shift key while I click and drag this, and holding that shift key down keeps it constrained to the same proportion or ratio. I'm going to slide that size up. I'm going to click and oops. Go back to the direct select tool. Hold down the option key, click and drag, and then press Command D, which duplicates that last action. Alright, now I'm going to option, click and drag, and then press Command D, and they just automatically appear. Notice that last row just fell off the page, so I'm going to delete that. So that gives us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times 3 is 15 little areas for us to do thumbnail sketches in. Now this is not necessary, you don't have to do this, but it helps out in giving you the right ratio to design in.